Have you ever had one of those moments, um, you're just doing something totally routine, maybe brushing your teeth,
Mm-hmm.
and you glance in the mirror, and just for a split second, the person looking back doesn't quite, uh, doesn't quite match who you feel you are inside.
Oh, yeah. That feeling. It can be really unsettling.
Exactly. So today we're taking a deep dive beyond just the physical act of change like weight loss, specifically to explore the really profound internal shifts that come along with it.
Right.
This isn't just about numbers on a scale, it's about the whole psychological and emotional landscape, how that fundamentally transforms. And a lot of our insights today, they're built around the remarkable wisdom of a man named Dan Hollis.
Really fascinating thinker on this topic.
He really is. So our mission here is to try and uncover those deeper challenges, the psychological, the emotional ones that often pop up after the big external changes happen.
Yeah, after the goal is reached,
Yeah.
supposedly.
Right. It's about navigating that really unfamiliar territory of, a new self. And as we explore this, I think you'll find some genuinely surprising insights and maybe, a few aha moments that might click with your own experiences.
It's a truly fascinating area and honestly often overlooked in the whole transformation narrative, wouldn't you say?
Definitely.
What so many people see as the finish line, hitting a certain weight, is often, as our sources show, just the start of a completely different and you could argue much more complex journey.
That's a great way to put it.
And yeah, we'll touch on things like semaglutide, which everyone's talking about, but from a really nuanced angle focusing on what it means for this internal work.
Okay, so let's get into this. Let's
Yeah.
unpack it with a specific story, one that feels quite common, actually. Our sources talk about Adrienne, a 53-year-old woman, and she'd been losing weight successfully using semaglutide for several months. Appetite down, knees felt better, clothes fitting differently.
All the positive external signs.
Exactly. All the markers of success were there. But then, one morning, just brushing her teeth, same routine, leaning over the sink, she looks up, and she didn't recognize the woman in the mirror.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was her face, obviously, but thinner, the lines seemed sharper somehow, and her eyes, the source described them as somehow older and newer at the same time.
That's evocative.
Old?
Older and newer.
Isn't it? And Adrienne told Dan Hollis, and this is really the core of it, she said, "I knew it was me, but I didn't feel like I belonged to her."
Ooh, didn't feel like I belonged to her. That really hits home. That feeling of dissonance, that disconnect. That's what Dan calls identity lag.
Identity lag. Explain that a bit more.
Well, he put it quite beautifully, actually. He said, your body can change faster than your story, and when that happens, the soul gets confused.
Wow.
Yeah. Think about it. Like, your physical self is rocketing ahead on a high-speed train, maybe. But your internal narrative, your sense of self, it's still kind of plodding along on a horse and buggy.
Right. Miles behind.
Exactly. That gap, that feeling of your body arriving somewhere your mind hasn't even mapped out yet.
Yeah.
It can be deeply, deeply disorienting.
That's such a powerful way to reframe the challenge, because it really pushes back against that common idea, doesn't it?
Which idea?
That the hard part is just the diet, the exercise, the discipline of actually losing the weight.
Precisely. Most people do think that's the mountain to climb.
Mm-hmm.
But what was Dan Hollis's thinking on why the period after the change is often the real crucible?
Yeah, why is that the crisis point?
Well, it's exactly that ingrained belief he wanted to shift. Dan Hollis argues that, yeah, the initial effort is huge, obviously, but the true crisis, that often happens after.
Okay.
When that constant physical hunger starts to fade, maybe those old rituals around food or even body image kind of dissolve, and that familiar, almost protective layer, that armor as some call it, drops away.
You're left sort of exposed.
Exposed. Standing there, sometimes feeling unrecognizable even to yourself. Adrienne wasn't actually mourning the lost pounds, she was mourning the version of herself who had carried them.
The familiar self.
The familiar self. She knew how to be that person. She was, as she put it, good at being her old self. And now she felt like, and these are her words, a body in transition and a mind without a map.
A mind without a map. That must feel incredibly unsettling, almost adrift.
Completely.
So for someone grappling with that kind of identity lag, how did Dan Hollis suggest they even start? How do you bridge that gap between the old story and this new physical reality? Because, importantly, he didn't just offer platitudes, right?
Yeah.
No superficial praise.
No, absolutely not. And that's crucial. His approach was much, much deeper. He mainly just listened. The source says, like a mirror that doesn't ask questions, only returns what you're ready to see.
That's interesting, just reflecting.
Reflecting, and he told Adrienne, the weight loss is just the clearing. The becoming takes longer.
The becoming. Okay, so how did he help with that part? The becoming. It wasn't about more dieting, obviously.
No, not at all. It was fascinating, actually. It was about helping her rewrite the internal language she used for her own experiences.
Rewriting the language. How so?
He gave specific examples, like shame wasn't just shame anymore, it became memory, something you carry but don't have to be defined by.
Okay. Shame becomes memory.
Control, that tight grip, became curiosity. Instead of trying to manage everything, exploring it. And discipline wasn't just rigid rules, it became alignment, finding what felt truly right internally.
Wow, those are subtle but powerful shifts. Control to curiosity. Discipline to alignment.
Huge shifts. So Adrienne started filling her new frame, as the source puts it, not with food or fear, but with permission.
Permission for what?
Permission to just not know who she was yet, permission to feel awkward in that in-between space, and permission to build a new story without feeling like she had to completely burn the old one down.
So integrating, not obliterating.
Exactly. And the sources note this really subtle but significant change in her behavior. She didn't suddenly love her reflection or even smile at it, but she stood there longer.
Stood there longer.
Yeah. Didn't flinch away, didn't force a smile, just stayed. And this, Dan would emphasize, this is about learning how to belong to yourself again. Slowly. Patiently.
That idea of rewriting the internal language, it really changes everything, doesn't it? It shifts the focus inwards.
Completely.
And speaking of those internal shifts, Dan Hollis also dug into something most of us think we get, but maybe don't fully grasp. Hunger itself.
Ah, yes, hunger.
We tend to think of it as purely physical, right?
Right.
Stomach growling, feeling faint.
That's the common understanding, for sure. And that's precisely what Dan Hollis challenged. He taught that emotional hunger often sounds like a craving, but it's actually a question, a need asking to be seen.
A need asking to be seen. Say more about that.
Well, think about it. How often do people mistake fatigue for hunger? Or loneliness? Or even just being totally overstimulated?
All the time, probably.
Right. And they reach for food because it's easy, it's available, it's maybe comforting. But what they truly need might be connection or rest or just clarity. Quiet. Dan had this powerful line. When food stops being your emotional scaffolding, you don't just feel lighter, you feel exposed.
Exposed. That's a strong word. Almost vulnerable.
Very. It's like shedding a familiar skin, even if that skin felt heavy and uncomfortable sometimes. But, importantly, he didn't shame this pattern. He named it. He reframed emotional hunger as wisdom misdirected. The need is real. The method of meeting it is just off target.
Wisdom misdirected. I like that. It takes the judgment out.
Exactly.
So this feeling of being exposed, of losing that emotional scaffolding, it brings us right to the current discussions around medications like Semaglutide, Ozempic, Wegovy.
Yep, the GLP-1s.
Right. They were developed for type 2 diabetes. They clearly cause significant weight loss for many. But Dan Hollis had a really crucial perspective on their role here, didn't he? He stressed they're not a solution to emotional eating.
And that is such a vital distinction he consistently made. Dan's view was essentially this. Semaglutide isn't the solution to emotional eating. It's the silence that lets you find one.
Ah, the silence that lets you find one.
Okay, think about it. These medications work by suppressing appetite, quieting those intense physical cravings for many people. But for Dan, their real power wasn't just the suppression itself, but the opportunity that quietness creates.
An opportunity for what?
An opportunity, a window to actually do the deeper work, to rebuild identity, to change behavioral patterns, to develop emotional awareness, all while the intensity of the physical cravings takes a step back.
So the medication creates space, but doesn't do the internal work for you.
Precisely. The real work, as he called it, isn't just about not feeling hungry. It's about learning to distinguish true physiological hunger from what he called signal confusion, that fatigue or loneliness masquerading as hunger.
Right.
And then, crucially, learning to meet those deeper cravings, those underlying needs, with insight and intention, not just impulse, asking, as he put it, the question behind the craving.
What is this really about?
Exactly. What am I truly hungry for right now?
This leads perfectly into a third, really powerful reframing from Dan Hollis, one that resonated a lot with me personally. His take on failure in weight loss.
Oh, this is a big one.
It really is. Because so many people, if they have a setback, if they fall off the wagon, they see it as proof, right?
Right.
Proof that they're weak or undisciplined or maybe fundamentally broken.
That narrative is so common and so destructive. Dan Hollis completely turned that on its head. He said, failure isn't the end, it's a message, a moment of feedback.
Okay.
And sometimes, he added, it's the most honest conversation you'll ever have with yourself.
Wow. Failure is an honest conversation.
Yeah, he treated failure not as something to be ashamed of, but as a data point, something you can actually learn from. He explained that a relapse, for instance, isn't some moral failing or a betrayal of your progress. Often it's simply the brain asking for the old familiar rhythm.
The familiar comfort, even if it wasn't healthy.
Exactly. And when you ignore that signal, when you just try to power through with shame and willpower, he cautioned that you don't just fail, you fracture. You break something internally.
That makes sense.
He even had a pretty direct quote about the new medications in this context. Most people aren't failing semaglutide, they're failing to prepare for what comes after it, meaning they haven't built the internal skills to navigate life once the medication's effects lessen or if they stop taking it.
Or even while they're on it, dealing with the underlying stuff.
Right, failing to address the why behind the original patterns.
So bringing all these threads together then, what does this perspective on failure mean for how you, the listener, might approach your own progress, whether it's weight loss or any other change? It seems to imply that those moments, those breakdowns or perceived failures, they're often just signals.
Exactly. Signals that the support system needs reinforcing, not that the person is weak. That was a key part of his message.
The support system needs reinforcing, not the person is weak.
Such a crucial shift. Dan taught that setbacks are almost sacred moments if you're willing to look at them with curiosity instead of judgment. He had this incredibly powerful statement. The shame isn't in failing. The shame is in pretending you were supposed to be perfect.
Oof. Read that again. The shame isn't in failing.
The shame is in pretending you were supposed to be perfect. Grace, he argued, is built not by avoiding stumbles, but by how you respond to them. Do you reach for blame, self-criticism, or do you reach for a better tool, a different approach?
Learning from it.
Learning. He encouraged people to pause in those moments and ask themselves, what story am I telling myself about this failure right now? And is that story actually helping me become who I want to be? He really believed that learning how to fail forward, as he termed it, was perhaps the most profound and lasting transformation anyone could achieve.
Fail forward. Okay. So these core insights from Dan Hollis, whether we're talking about that sense of identity lag or understanding the real language of emotional hunger or learning how to fail gracefully, even sacredly, they all point to the same truth, don't they?
Which is,
That true transformation, the kind that lasts, goes so much deeper than just the physical changes. It's really about building a fundamentally new relationship with yourself, with your body, yes, but also with your thoughts, your feelings, your history, your whole internal landscape.
absolutely. It's about a deep internal rewiring. And often, as Adrian's story showed, it happens quietly, in those small moments you might least expect.
So the core lesson here, maybe, is that this journey of change, especially something as personal as weight loss, but really any significant transformation, it's often less about what you lose and far more about what you discover, what you learn, and what you consciously decide to rebuild internally. It comes back to that quiet power, doesn't it? Of just standing there longer in front of your own reflection, letting the newness, the becoming settle in.
Beautifully put. And maybe a final thought for you to consider as you reflect on all this. If that old familiar hunger, whether physical or emotional, starts to quiet down, and something perhaps more honest starts arriving in its place, what new permissions might you need to grant yourself? What do you need to allow in order to truly welcome that honest arrival and finally maybe belong to yourself again?
That's a powerful question to sit with. We really invite you, listening now, to reflect on your own experiences with change, with self-perception. What might your own quiet window, that moment of pause, of honest observation reveal about the person you're becoming right now?